Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one here, and welcome back to another episode of Why Substances Suck. Today we're going to be covering cocaine, a substance I'm sure a lot of you can think of many reasons as to why it would be terrible. And I just want to briefly address the meaning behind this series as well, because in the Kratom video, there was a bit of confusion. Thinking I just made the base statement that I thought Kratom just flat out sucked, which that isn't true. And even here, there's some things about cocaine that don't make it suck. But the point is that these videos are just a dive into what potential subjectivity there is to it. What are the points that would make cocaine suck among various people? That's what we're exploring in this video. But also in this video, we have a little bit of a change. Here along with me, I got my good friend John. John's going to be helping me present some of these facts, which I'm sure his expertise will diversify things.
Just to introduce myself a little bit, I have known someone that's no one for almost 1.5 years, and we've been creating a lot of content together. My background, I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology and Counseling. I currently work as a licensed behavioral therapist, and I'm also in school for clinical psychopharmacology. It's a little bit about me, and I hope you guys enjoy listening to me and someone that's no one talk about a very interesting substance and why we particularly think that you should be safe, and why we also consider the fact that it's not really a good drug.
So we got a long list ahead of us with a special feature today. I'm sure everyone's gonna love it, so let's waste no time and jump right into this. Nasal problems. So the first thing I want to bring up is the route of administration. The thing is with cocaine, you just can't straight up swallow it like with a lot of other things. And most popularly, people end up choosing to snort it instead of making the more stronger and harmful freebase form of crack cocaine. Now the route of snorting can cause both short and long-term effects with cocaine. Me personally, I would often get a runny nose from cocaine, but I would commonly from snorting most things. But something unique to cocaine is there would always be a chance that I might get into a sneezing fit, which, when you're off it, it can be kinda irritating when you're trying to enjoy the high. But if used long term, one can experience damage to the nostrils. You can damage the cartilage and mucosa in your nose, which eventually may lead to a hole in your septum, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the wall between each nostril. These effects can be very apparent with cocaine, especially when being used in the long term. Addiction.
As previously mentioned, cocaine avoids first-pass metabolization in the liver. It is also not orally active. This is a very heavy method of reinforcement. So you're reinforcing your dopamine pathway in your brain. So this is your primary pleasure chemical. And it's associated with reward and saliency, which just means how important something is. Cocaine is directed at the reward circuit, more specifically the mesolimbic dopamine pathway. That causes a release of dopamine. Psychologically speaking, dopamine neurons stop responding to that primary reinforcer, in this case being cocaine. A second example I can give is food. Once this occurs over a period of time, your dopamine neurons then become conditioned to the stimulus. So they only respond to the conditioned stimulus, which at this point would be cocaine. So for example, just the sight of the drug or somebody talking about the drug. And then just to pair it with the food example I had mentioned earlier, this would lead to maybe the sight of a refrigerator, getting your dopamines to fire, your dopamine neurons rather to fire. And so that increase in dopamine firing leads to habits and compulsions, and this is where really the addiction begins with cocaine, because cocaine has a very powerful psychological addiction.
Withdrawal.
As I previously had mentioned, cocaine does have a powerful withdrawal effect, particularly very strong psychologically. Cocaine does have physical effects like depression, anxiety, fatigue. This is when you come off of the substance abruptly, trouble concentrating, increase in your hunger, or nightmares, chills, nerve pain, and muscle aches are mainly the physical symptoms that come with cocaine withdrawal. And if I can speak personally on it, I myself did not think that the withdrawal symptoms of this specific substance were very physical compared to other substances I have experience with. It was very psychological. And this is where I'll get into what I had previously touched on, which is the psychological aspect of your dopamine, which causes you to have that intense craving for cocaine, which makes it a more psychologically reinforcing drug. And that's mainly just because you are very motivated to escalate your drive to get the reward, which is the cocaine, because your dopamine neurons are firing at a very rapid rate, way more than it should be. And that leads to a dopamine deficiency. And so high dosage chasing is a failed combat attempt to reach that now unmanageable craving. And so that's why cocaine withdrawal physical side effects are, I'm not downplaying them. They're very important and they cause a lot of pain and they cause a lot of confusion. But I want to specifically make people understand that cocaine is a very reinforcing drug for the brain. This could be similar to nicotine. It very much reinforces our pleasure, and that causes us to seek it out more rather than other drugs. So that is why cocaine, I would say, is more psychologically addicting. And I think that's mainly the thing that people have to watch out for, is that factor of trying to escalate your motivational drive to combat your dopamine neurons firing, basically every time that you take the drug.
Criminal activity. With this, I mean more so on a large scale than compared to what you may find on the streets. But in all honesty, it's pretty much known to have violent prone people involved. But if you know your history with cocaine, then you know that countries like Colombia and Mexico played a huge role in the distribution of it to the States. I highly recommend watching the show Narcos if you want the specifics of how all that goes down. But figures like Pablo Escobar and El Chapo are known for making billions of dollars from their cocaine operations. Often though, figures like these would often find themselves in positions of power and would instill fear into others to maintain control. There was corruption from all places though, as it would be more appealing to shut up and take some riches instead of ending up with a bullet in your head along with everyone else you know. Cocaine for the most part has always had a bad look from the media. It's an illegal substance, and often to maintain order, people will commit to other illegal activities without a second thought at times. There's a lot of money to be made from cocaine. There's a lot of potential for addiction to occur, making for a stream of consistent revenue. High price. But there is such ruthless criminal activity because of this. This is probably one of the main reasons I never really want to get this stuff. It often has a high price for what you end up getting. Normally I wouldn't even consider it really worth it unless you're like getting an 8-ball, which then normally you'd want to go in with people, but that isn't always the case. And grams usually range anywhere from 40 to even 100 at times, depending on the quality and where you are. But this is also a reason why a lot end up turning to crack. It's just a more efficient way of saving more and getting more out of the substance. Often cut.
And that specifically means just there is another substance that fills in with what you are getting. Therefore, the person who is selling it to you is making more money without your knowledge. So usually the cuts are non-harmful, maybe baking soda or benzocaine, but sometimes they can be fentanyl, sometimes they can be other drugs that with rapid consumption in an irresponsible manner can actually really scare the hell out of you, because your brain is actually, once your brain is addicted to cocaine, your brain actually responds to cocaine whenever you see it, like I had mentioned previously. So that is why a lot of heroin overdoses in the statistics that you see occur at other people's houses or occur somewhere where the person is not familiar with. That's because that person's brain didn't prepare. That person took that amount affected them just a little bit more to kill them. And that's because they were completely in a new environment. And so that's kind of when you take cocaine, you think you know what you're getting, so your brain prepares for that. And when it's cut, sometimes it can lead to very, very unfortunate consequences. I can think of a story. I knew a buddy who bought a bag of cocaine, and he was very excited for it. He was ready. He was going to have a really fun night out. I had met him in college. He was one of my friends. But instead, the bag was ketamine, and he had no idea. And I was there for him, and I was with him the entire night. But sometimes what you expect can actually be very frightening, because you go through a physical preparation as well as a mental preparation for these drugs. And that's what I want to specifically emphasize about cutting something, is that if you're on the other side as well, if you're the one who's selling the drug and you're cutting it, also be careful of the social interactions that you involve yourself with. You do not want to put yourself in a dangerous situation, such as cutting something with something so ridiculous that you get threatened or physically harmed. That is also one danger of cutting a substance. If you are distributing or have anything to do with that, then you may have a problem. So basically what I want to say is that the environment is the most important thing when it comes to the drug. It should always be tested. You should always know what you're getting. And if you can't test it, then just put it away. That's my number one advice, because a lot of the substances that I've tried have came by accident, and they were very scary. And so this is why I feel you should have a knowledge and a preparation going into things.
Grimy drug scene. Now with this, I'm more so focused on the streets and just the general consensus when it comes to cocaine. It's especially apparent with crack. But with cocaine, it's like you're pretty much stepping into a darker side. Not always necessarily, but often the ties in the situation can be taken a bit more serious compared to something like weed. I do feel like there's more likely to be retaliation when complications occur, such as skimping someone, trying to rob them, or not paying them back type shit. Often people who choose to deal cocaine know the kind of risk they're getting into. The consequences can often be much more serious. But again with this, there can be a lot of corruption, especially if those involved are on it a lot or addicted themselves. They might even be more likely to turn their heads at you and think that you're on some bullshit. Not that great compared to other stims. This is another reason I don't really get cocaine. I'd much rather do something more long-lasting and not as reinforcing, even if that's something like Ritalin. Prescription stimulants have given me stronger and just overall more pleasurable experiences on average, let alone other street amphetamines, which would definitely give me more of a party vibe. And even when it comes to comparing the price of other stimulants, you can easily get a lot more bang for your buck. But both the actual effects of the substance and the socialization and market behind it, in my opinion, is way overhyped, and other stimulants provide just as much, if not more, stimulatory effects. Often combined with alcohol/other combinations.
Cocaine is often combined with a variety of substances because cocaine is pretty much, you're able to use cocaine with a lot of substances. This is why you see the very popular speedball, the combination of heroin and cocaine, that balance that people report they get from the downer effect of the heroin and the up effect of cocaine. Cocaine is often combined with alcohol as well, which can lead to problems that I'm sure we'll cover in this video that I'll talk about later. So cocaine is an easy drug to combine with anything because it intensifies the drug and makes any combination with it more dangerous. It also can create novel highs, if that makes sense, or experiences, and it can intensify the effects of cocaine. So essentially that also reinforces the fact that the user will not stop using the drug, because they may associate the polydrug combination with the fact that this high is so great. People don't often realize the risks of combining cocaine with other drugs. Specifically, prescription drugs are very lethal, can be lethal when combined with cocaine. But yeah, it's just with polydrug use, it really depends on what kind of drug you're mixing with the cocaine, and also what kind of effects that the other substance that you're using can pair with the cocaine, and it may have, a harmful effect or a more positive high, which again leads to more reinforcement, makes you more addicted to cocaine rather, and it also leads to more of a risk of side effects and overdose. So this is a very common thing in cocaine. Like I've said multiple times, is one of the most popular and easiest drugs to use with other substances.
Insomnia. Now with this, it's going to be much more apparent from frequent and prolonged use. If it's combined with something like alcohol though, this may be more easier to combat, but especially if you've done cocaine just alone, or if you've done it recently before bed, this will probably be a lot more apparent. But this is pretty self-explanatory. It's a stim, which I personally think that the after effects may cause you to be in your head a bit more, and just have a running mind that may keep you from finding easy sleep. Hyperthermia.
Another side effect of cocaine is hyperthermia, which is the most common side effect, and it's when your body temperature rises. And this is because primarily cocaine, like mentioned before, is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, therefore it leaves more in the postsynaptic neuron. And dopamine is also your primary temperature regulator in your body. So this is going to cause an extreme rise in body temperature, and it's going to reduce your homeostasis, which is going to cause a variety of maybe uncomfortable symptoms, such as cardiac symptoms, seizures, etc. Because dopamine is not only responsible for pleasure, but a variety of functions in the brain, just like your other neurotransmitters. Dopamine is responsible for motor movement, pleasure. Serotonin is responsible for mood, hunger, and well-being, stuff like that. So neurotransmitters don't have just one function, and cocaine typically affects dopamine, so it messes with your temperature, and it can be a severe side effect.
Impact on sexual performance/interest. This can affect people in different ways, and initially, it normally isn't considered anything bad. It more so sprouts up when you've come to form an addiction. Now for someone who doesn't use normally, a guy may get stim dick, or in other words, they can't get hard, which could suck. Other than that, it could cause someone to be a bit more forward than they would normally be, possibly influencing some poor behavior. But when someone uses for a while, and especially if they use it for sexual enhancement, dependents can form on needing the drug to perform right, and it may get to a point where you need it more and more to feel the same until you get to a sort of plateau. Some may decide at such a point to finally stop, but coming back, they may find they have no sexual attractions like they used to, that it may be dulled. This too is a factor that can significantly contribute to depression. Central nervous system issues.
For the CNS issues, the central nervous system issues that come with cocaine use, they're not really desirable. I have to mention the fact that they do cause seizures. That's one of the effects in the central nervous system. I have to mention that because it is rare, and it's obviously more common in status epileptics, but the fact is that 8% of hospital visits because of cocaine were because of seizures. So this is something that does happen. It's not very typical, not very frequent, and I should mention that it is also very much associated with polydrug use, so combining other substances may lead you to have a seizure with cocaine. So cocaine alone is not typically a seizure-provoking agent.
Cardiovascular issues.
Cocaine does, however, provoke issues in terms of cardiovascular health, that being the heart and specifically stroke. So cocaine is very, very hard on the heart, and it regulates your temperature, like I had mentioned earlier. So cocaine is going to lead to a variety of risks associated with cardiovascular health, and strokes are one of the most frequently reported effects of cocaine. And this can be a use of just too much cocaine, or it can be use of chronic use of cocaine. Maybe you could just take cocaine one time and this could happen to you. But what I specifically would like to mention is that due to this damage that cocaine can cause, specifically with a stroke, I should mention that some of the research has indicated that cocaine causes vasoconstriction problems, as also spasms, because of the high levels of dopamine in your body. Dopamine also increases the risks of cerebral hemorrhage, which can provoke a stroke in your brain. And I'd say the seizures and tremors, the side effect reported, co-occurringly with cardiac issues, are less important than the cardiac effects. Cocaine is extremely dangerous when it comes to the heart. And there are multiple research articles and knowledge or fact-based information that supports this. There's been a 20-year research about the mechanism of action on cocaine and the heart. And the most common symptom of cocaine use is chest pain, and 50% of patients admitted to the hospital because of cocaine use is due to cardiovascular issues, whereas 8% is due to tremors and seizures. So I feel that cardiac issues are very much more important, although I don't want to downplay the fact that, it can cause a severe dysregulation. And mainly when I talk about seizures, I'm talking about your homeostasis. It causes a severe disruption in that, and usually with other drugs in combination, it can cause a severe spike in your monoamines, dopamine firing like crazy, and then you don't have that homeostasis anymore. So your calcium channels and all the stuff like that, they just get bombarded. So essentially, some people have risk factors associated with them, like status epileptics have risk factors, and this is why it should be mentioned.
Respiratory issues. Now this tends to be much less common with cocaine use, considering you aren't smoking it. With crack, you can get what they call crack lung. But with cocaine, there could be possible dyspnea, which is having difficult or labored breathing. You can also have chest pains, which may be more related to cardiovascular problems, but there have been some cases of people getting dangerous pneumonia actually. This has only been reported in those who have engaged in prolonged use, as it probably takes a buildup for the substance to cause white blood cells to become concentrated in the lungs. But respiratory issues won't likely be a problem with cocaine unless there's some other potentiator or abuse of it. Egoccentricity. This effect I see somewhat common with cocaine users, but it can happen with any stimulant really. But one can definitely come to feel like they're Superman, or that they can just do anything. And not only that, some just go ahead and do anything without regard for others at times. This quality can make people seem to be somewhat like assholes at times, and they might not even really notice that they're doing it. I've definitely been in some situations where beef sprung up and cocaine most likely influenced it. My first time doing cocaine was someone like that with the people we were with, which you can find that story on my channel under the Chapter 1, The Beginnings of a Psychonaut playlist. But people can pick up selfish qualities, and depending on the degree of their usage, their selfishness can just get out of hand in cases to where they may just be considered bad people. Anxiety.
Cocaine is popularly being recognized as an anxiogenic, so an anxiety-causing agent. and that is due to its mechanism of action. The reason why this occurs is largely unknown. There's been a lot of research in this area, but not a lot is known about this specific subject. I will, however, try to give you my best educated responses. Dopamine and serotonin are typically involved in anxious states, and when cocaine is administered, it typically alters your cortisol levels in your brain because it's a non-selective inhibitor of norepinephrine as well. So it changes your whole endocrine hormone system in your brain, leading it to become more unstable. And this is why the research is very murky and hard to point to a specific cause, because a lot of things can provoke an anxiogenic response. I mean, if a car almost pulls out in front of you, that could provoke an anxiogenic response. It's just hard to understand how cocaine typically does this within the brain. Now, I will, however, mention that the best method for acute anxiety, which typically I find really common with usage, is best handled with a benzodiazepine. So these are going to be fast-acting, low-dose drugs, such as maybe alprazolam, midazolam, etc., short-acting drugs. Because it's actually been found in research that basically benzodiazepines are one of the only agents that affect an anxiogenic response and can actually try to restore normal cortisol levels. As far as anxiety goes with cocaine, though, I'll just close. It's very certainly isn't anxiogenic. The research has pointed to the fact that it does alter our adrenic state, but I think that it's very typical, and I think that it usually flies under the radar for most people. And I've had a panic attack myself under the influence, and I treated myself with a benzodiazepine. So I'm not saying that you should do what I do. This was a long time ago in my life.
Irritability/hypervigilance. So this is one I felt a few times, especially when I would have a runny nose like I mentioned earlier. But you can definitely feel more hyper aware of your senses, and sometimes it can just be overwhelming or annoying. This may contribute further towards egocentricity and anxiety, and also the next reason. But I've been in states where I may just be kinda more twitchy, I may have less of a tolerance to put up with people, there might be certain sounds that start to get annoying. It can really just be all kinds of things if you do end up experiencing it. Aggression, depression, and other mood changes.
This drug can also cause depression and, increased aggression because this drug is messing with your neurotransmitter balances. That's the simplest explanation that I can give you. Dopamine is severely dysfunctional when cocaine use is chronic or acute. So that's going to lead to more aggressive behavior, more stimulation, but it's also going to lead to a lack of pleasure. Usually referred to as a come down, but in dopamine specifically, it's going to be harder because you're always chasing that high, as I mentioned, and dopamine regulates that. When we're talking about depression and aggression here, talking mainly about, you got to realize that cocaine is, I talk a lot about dopamine in this video, but cocaine is not selective. Therefore, meaning that it reuptakes all of the three monoamines, serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So it does all three of them. It's a reuptake inhibitor of all three. Therefore, it messes with serotonin and norepinephrine, which are responsible for your mood, and it messes with dopamine as well, which is responsible for your mood as well, but in smaller portions, and it's also responsible for aggression. So these are some things that cocaine can cause.
Appetite suppression. Now this one is more subjective. You can better avoid this by simply eating beforehand or even after because of the duration. but it could be something that has an impact, especially if you're doing enough to where it has an impact on your normal eating habits. That, of course, can lead to weight loss, which if enough, could lead one to an unhealthy state and at more risk. Dehydration. This is going to be a common effect with any stimulant. Expect there to be a degree of dehydration with side effects like frequent urination, perspiration, and dry mouth. Because of this, it is recommended you have water on hand. It will be more likely to be a problem because of a lack of water intake and or when cocaine is done in high doses or in prolonged use. This can be much more apparent when in combination, especially with something like alcohol, but one may be less inclined to consume more water due to the appetite suppression. It all just depends, and this is usually worsened by other factors. Teeth grinding / jaw lock. So this effect isn't super common with cocaine, but it is definitely something that can happen, especially in higher doses and with prolonged use. For some, you may end up doing it and not even really be noticing it. With cocaine, the teeth grinding or jaw locking won't be anything that severe compared with something like MDMA. I imagine that you'll be more likely to experience soreness as an after effect if this effect does much at all. Stim psychosis.
Stimulant psychosis is a super fascinating side effect of basically all dopamine reuptake inhibitors. I mean, any drug like methamphetamine, amphetamines, lisdexamfetamine, any ADHD medication practically, anything that has any effect on dopamine can lead to delusions. And that's very fascinating to me because I did a research project on schizophrenia, and the positive symptoms of schizophrenia were modeled by stimulant psychosis. And stimulant psychosis occurs because of too much dopamine in your postsynaptic neuron. So therefore, positive symptoms of schizophrenia, like seeing things that aren't there, or hallucinating voices, or hallucinating sounds, touches, sights, smells, those are all common side effects of stimulants such as cocaine. Maybe not as severe, but those are side effects with chronic, acute use. Cocaine can send you into a severe psychotic state, and that's associated with the science behind the primary mechanism of schizophrenia. So stimulant psychosis is a real thing, and it's super fascinating, but it is very dangerous. And this usually comes with binges if you're using a lot. So it's not something to mess around with, but it's also such a fascinating area to talk about. It's also another reason of why cocaine is not a particularly enjoyable drug. It's very short acting, and you use it in combination with a bunch of different drugs. I don't really know a lot of people who do cocaine, just cocaine only. Obviously there are people that do, but you're going to drive yourself into a state of psychosis. And I did a research project on the schizophrenia model, which is hypoglutamate function and hyperdopamine function, which is essentially what's happening here. So too much of anything, such as dopamine here, is going to lead to stimulant psychosis, which is a very real thing, and it's very dangerous. Rather unpredictable, I would say. It's unpredictable.
Short duration. So this is a big one for me. The high of cocaine will often not last longer than 30 minutes, if that. Sure, you can have residual effects after this point, but most people get their satisfaction from the peak. This short duration motivates users to do more, and like Evan mentioned earlier, the route of administration in itself can be reinforcing and addictive. Now in some cases, the short duration may be more attractive for some. It doesn't last very long, making it ideal for a night out. So in some cases, it's a pro. But for me personally, I like my substances to last a while. I just want to take something and be done with it. Plus, the more you have to go through and ingest it, the more likely you'll form a habit out of it. Pregnancy / crosses the placenta. So this is one I haven't really talked about with past substances, but it's an effect that can take place if someone pregnant chooses to do so. Maybe this person is ignorant of the fact, or maybe they just don't give a fuck. Either way, this newborn is coming out with cravings for cocaine now, and they may potentially suffer from birth defects, like having mental impairments, or abnormal growths for an example. Really, this whole person's life is fucked before they even get a chance to start living it. Plus, there may be more complications brought to the mother. For example, something called placental abruption can happen, basically where the placenta separates before birth, which can result in heavy bleeding and be deadly for both the mother and the baby. Overhyped.
Another thing, to be honest, is that I really do believe in that cocaine is not a very interesting drug. It really only does a few things, like cause euphoria, reduce your fatigue, maybe enhance your mental acuity here and there. But as far as the mechanism of action of what it does, it's just not I don't think it's worth it, to be honest. And as a user, I used for a long time. I just really, still to this day, I don't think it was really worth it. I don't think it's worth it to use it. I think there are very, very much more interesting substances available. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you to stop taking cocaine. You can do what you want. But to me, it's just the mechanism of action gets very boring. And I find that, other drugs, such as psychedelics in particular, or cannabis, is even more enjoyable than cocaine, because the mechanism of action and the effects on me are very different, and they come from all different directions. So that's why I find cocaine to be very dull and very essentially boring to consume, after you've done it for so many times. Maybe it's exciting at first, which pretty much all new things are exciting, but it gets pretty old after a while, and it really takes a toll on your body. So that's why I don't particularly consider it a good thing to use. Now, you can use it if you want. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that, there are better things to use, in my opinion.
Can lead to crack use. So because of a few of the adverse effects discussed already, people will end up turning to crack. This may be because snorting it is causing physical problems. It may be because cocaine isn't strong enough now. It may be to save money. And crack cocaine warrants a whole other video for why it sucks. Many of the adverse effects are the same though, just at a higher degree. But there are some exclusive adverse effects to crack, so maybe one day we'll have a video on that. Pupil dilation. So with this last one, this is very situational, as it isn't really a problem in most cases. But if you need to present yourself in front of someone, like the police for example, or just someone you don't want to let know that you're inebriated, this could present a problem. If enough light comes in your eyes, your pupils may look large enough that can give it away. So long video today, but I think John and I tackled this very well. As always, if you think we missed anything important or got information wrong, let us know in the comments. If you want to see more episodes of why substances suck, or any kind of video really, let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy the video, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share it, and follow the socials. It's been Someone That's No One, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.